It's that time of year again, and Christmas is right around the corner, and I'm here to give you tips to make it really easy for you this year. I get asked a lot, do I use one or two consistencies and why? And the answer is, I use two consistencies, an outline and a flood. So my outline is my thicker icing, which I use to outline the edge of my cookies, and I use a looser flood to flood the inside of my cookie. I like to outline it because it keeps all that flood in, and when I use a looser flood, I can flood a lot faster and I don't have to worry about smoothing it out or shaking my cookie to make it nice and flat. The other reason I like to have an outline and a flood is my outline consistency doubles as my detailed icing, so I don't have to make another consistency after. It also makes nice big puffy details as well, which I love. Another way to decorate your cookies is to paint some flood icing on. So this is great if you're really in a rush and you don't have a lot of time to decorate cookies and you just want to make pretty cookies. Or if you know your audience may not like tons of icing on their cookie, this is a good way to get around it. So as you can see here, I'm just using my flood, spreading it all over my cookie, and it'll create a nice base for some details on it. You can tell this consistency is flood because it's quite loose and it's almost liquid. So when I'm painting it, you can see the brush strokes in it, but a second or two later, you tend to see those brush strokes disappear. So when we talk about flood, that's kind of what we mean, is that it's an icing that kind of settles on its own and melts into each other. And then once we let our flood base dry, which it dries super quick because it's nice and thin, you can go ahead and do your details with your outline consistency. And you can see it makes a really pretty cookie and perfect for the holidays. And again, we're doing the same with the snowflake here. I'm using a blue because we like to switch up the colors sometimes. Not everything has to be white, red, and green. So a nice snowflake with the blue base looks amazing. And then again, I use going with my details to finish off the cookie. And I'll show you an example here where I'm outlining and flooding. And I like to let my outline dry just for a couple minutes. So what I would do normally is outline all my cookies. So if I was doing this stocking and doing a bunch of them, I would outline all the stockings and then I would come back and flood them all. And by the time I came back to the very first one I did, the outline would be dry. The reason I like to dry my outline for a few minutes is because if I don't, sometimes the flood icing, the pressure of the icing pushes that line out. And so the reason I outline my cookies is to make that shape really stand out and be nice and perfect. And so I don't want my flood icing to kind of ruin what I've already laid down with my outline. And just as important as your consistency is your royal icing. There's a few tricks that we do to prevent bleeding, to give the icing flexibility, and make it taste great. So if you don't have a good recipe, make sure to check mine out. I'll link it in the description of the video below. And there's so many tricks that you can learn to get rid of bubbles, to make good consistency, how to color your icing. I've got it all on my channel, all in details, and how to bag icing, how to cut your bag, why we use tipless bags. All those types of things are super important. And as you go, you learn more and more. So when you start making mistakes, or you see that your cookies aren't turning out the way you see everybody else's cookies, that's when you start to ask yourself questions, and that's where you find answers. It's okay to make mistakes. I've had all of them happen to me, trust me. So it's almost like a process that you have to go through. Here I'm showing you kind of another reason why I would outline. So this is a little popsicle cookie, and I kind of made a squiggle at the top because I want to make drips. So when I have this outline, it's going to be a nice separation between my drippy icing and my base icing on the bottom, which is the purple. So when my outline is dry, no matter how much pressure I put on that bag and how much icing is flowing out, my outline will not move. And it'll keep exactly the shape that I've piped. And having a very close to perfect flood, and I say close to perfect because my flood tends to differ. It's not always the exact same. So if you want a thicker flood, that's okay. I prefer to use a thinner one because I find a thicker one, I really have to struggle to smooth it out at the end, especially if it's a bigger cookie, it takes longer to flood. So when I work with a looser flood, it settles really quick and then I don't have to do much to make it nice and flat. It kind of does it on its own. So this saves a lot of time when you're doing a lot of cookies. And here you can see we're using all the techniques together. A little bit of painting to give the background of the face. We did our outline and our flood, and now we're outlining Santa's mustache. So I'm using my outline consistency that doubles as my detail. And when you're doing a small area like this, you can use the same consistency for your flood. So we're using my outline as my flood. And right there you can see when I'm flooding that, it's pushing out the outline. And so what I did is not let this dry because I didn't want my outline to stay in the one place. I did a rough guide of where I wanted his mustache to be, and then I'm filling it with that same icing to make nice and puffy mustache. So when you have a small area like that and you fill it up with your outline consistency, as long as it's not super thick, you get a nice puffy icing, and it's easy to smooth out when you put a lot in a small area. So I hope these tips help you out. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Happy baking.